virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, God with us. Tellest good tidings to Zion, get thee up into the high mountain. O thou that tellest good tidings to Zion, get thee up into the high mountain. Tellest good tidings to Jerusalem, lift up thy voice with strength, lift it up, be not afraid. Say unto the cities of Judah, say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God, behold your God. Say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God, behold your God, behold your God. O thou that tellest good tidings to Zion, arise, shine, for thy light is come. Arise, 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 shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord, the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee, is risen upon thee. The glory, the glory, the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Every valley shall
calling all who cannot wait any longer for joy, for hope, and for some good news, even a little. The time has come. The waiting is over. Here in this time, we have an old story to tell, one that has been shared over and over for thousands of years, but still somehow remains unheard, still radical and risky. Breaking through these days of darkness and cold, division and fear. Interrupting the perpetual stories of violence and loss and the feelings of powerlessness. Into the errands and errors of our every day, Christmas arrives not only to comfort, but to awaken, to reassure and also to stir us up as a new life, a life of peace and justice and courageous love struggles to be born. Wondering if we will yet be the ones who make room in our lives and our world for the refugee, for the poor, for the plain and messy sweetness of a newborn child. If we will take the journey to Bethlehem, if we will be changed by the presence of a love that meets us where we are in the fields wherever we lay, and calls us forth into a new journey, a braver and bolder one, believing it is not too late for strong and gentle people to win, for compassion and truth to have the final say, for the bright light of hope to shine through even the darkest night. Come, let us celebrate the joy of Christmas. Come, let us worship together.
We light candles this Christmas with these words by Howard Thurman. Candles of joy, despite all sadness. Candles of hope, where despair keeps watch. Candles of courage, for fears ever present. Candles of peace, for tempest-tossed days. Candles of grace, to ease heavy burdens, candles of love, to inspire all my living, candles that will burn for all year long.
In the Christian tradition out of which we as Unitarian Universalists grow, Advent is the season preceding the birth of Jesus Christ. During the 4 weeks of Advent, Christians around the world sit quietly in the midst of chaos, preparing a place in their hearts where seeds of hope, peace, joy, and love take root. And as we as Unitarian Universalists honor and respect the traditions from many different religions, we bring Advent into our time. So as Unitarian Universalists, Advent asks, what are we waiting for and preparing for in our own lives and in the life of our world? This evening, we light all 4 candles of the Advent wreath, 3 purple and 1 pink, and we also light a 5th candle placed at the center of the Advent wreath. This is the Christ candle, lit only at a Christmas Eve service. The Christ candle reminds us of all the light that Jesus brought to the world through his life and his teachings. May the light of these Advent candles inspire us to bring more hope, more peace, more love, and more joy to the world. Now let's sing some carols. That is such a fun carol. So let's learn a little about it. The author of the carol Joy to the World, Isaac Watts, was born in 1674 to dissenting parents. Come on, that sounds kind of cool to us UUs, right? That means that they were people who refused to accept the authority and practices of the Church of England. As a boy, he sang hymns outside prison walls to encourage his father, who was often arrested for his nonconformist beliefs. Isaac showed promise as a poet at a very young age. And as he grew, he became increasingly unhappy with the hymns that he sang in church each week. In those days, hymns were the words of psalms set to music, which is well and good, but Watts saw that the hymns reflected little or nothing of the New Testament, so he sought to, rectify that error. His hymns, at least his earlier hymns, reinterpreted the Psalms in the light of the Christian faith. And in 1719, he published a book of hymns titled The Psalms of David, imitated in the language of the New Testament. One of those hymns was titled Joy to the World, which Watts based loosely on Psalm 98, which says, "Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth into joyous song and sing praises." In this hymn, Watts reinterpreted the psalm to rejoice in the coming of Jesus. This hymn was sung to various tunes for a number of years. Then in 1839, so this was, 120 years after it was originally published, Lowell Mason, a banker who happened to be quite interested in church music, published the tune that we now associate with Joy to the World. Mason borrowed liberally from classical music and acknowledged his debt to Handel's Messiah for parts of this hymn tune and explicitly adapted phrases from Messiah into the carol that we just all sang. The result is a favorite Christmas hymn based on an Old Testament psalm, based on a Hebrew Bible psalm, let me watch my lingo there, set to musical fragments composed in England and pieced together across the Atlantic in the United States. Watts wrote some 600 hymns altogether and is considered to be the father of Christian hymnody. The book of poetry that contained the lyrics for Joy to the World was published in 1719, making this carol one of the older ones that is still in popular circulation today, at over 300 years old. And even though it was never intended to be a Christmas carol, it certainly is one of the beloved ones now.
So we have now some readings, and the first one will come from the Gospel of Luke, one many are familiar with. That's chapter 2, verse 1 through 20. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged, and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in bands of cloth, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find the child wrapped in bands of cloth and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace among those whom he favors." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now and to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured all these things, all these words, and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, as it had been told to them.
reading this evening was written by Jody Cohen Hayashida. Writing of the Holy Family, Mary, Joseph, and the babe Jesus, Wendell Berry once asked what would happen if we ourselves, opening a stall, a latch thrown open countless times before, might find them there, breathing. I wonder what it would mean if we did. If we, still rubbing the sleep from our eyes, with our long daily list of tasks already running through our minds, suddenly stumbled upon the Holy Family. The Holy Family right there in front of us, huddled together against the cold, a tiny baby nestled into the arms of his parents. What would it mean for us to be startled away from our distracted thoughts, pulled suddenly into the intense needs of the moment, warm blankets, soft pillows, hot food, to understand immediately that we would have to make a choice, set aside the list of tasks, the laundry, the child's play date, the stack of papers teetering on the desk, or set aside this what? This miracle, this wonder, this invitation into another life. Because we could, of course, set it aside. It wouldn't be hard, or at least not complicated. We could just turn and walk away, reassure ourselves that someone else would soon come along to help. After all, the family is right there. We practically fell on top of them, for goodness sake. And honestly, they could be a little more considerate, now that we think about it. Move a bit more out of the way instead of acting so entitled, blocking the path of people who are responsible enough to take care of themselves and their own kids. Yeah, someone else will come along soon. Not that that family particularly deserves any help. We could set it aside. Or we could set the tasks aside. We could allow ourselves to be pulled into the urgency of the moment, and then pulled even further into a world sanctified by joy, by wonder, by the presence of holiness. We could allow ourselves to be pulled into that sanctified world with its new mother, luminous and weary from the work of giving birth, with its father, determined and probably a bit afraid, with its babe intoxicated with the scent of new life, his mouth already opening in hunger. We could choose that world. We could. I wonder what it would mean for us if we did. I ask only because I could swear to you that I have been seeing the Holy Family everywhere. Weary mothers, frightened fathers, and hungry children, everywhere. And maybe you've been seeing them too. Which would mean that now is the time we have to choose. Do we step around those holy ones on our way to check off our tasks one by one? Or do we step into that other life with its pressing demands and its astonishing glory, with its refusal to allow us to stumble backwards towards safety and comfort and self-focus? I ask only because I think that they are there right now, the mothers, the fathers, the children. They are out there, and they may be here, waiting for us to choose them, waiting for us to feed the hungry, to comfort the weary, to strengthen the frightened, to stand with the weak. I think they are waiting right now to see if we will choose rightly. I wonder what it would mean for all of us if we did. Now we're going to sing O Little Town of Bethlehem.
The first candle we light to remember those persons whom we have loved and lost. We pause to remember their name, their voice, their face, the memory that binds them to us in this season. We hold them before God, giving thanks for their lives in ours. Please take a moment to remember those who have died. I invite you to name them aloud or in the silence of your hearts.
The second candle we light is to redeem the pain of loss, the loss of relationships, the loss of jobs with the security they bring, the loss of health in ourselves and our family members, the loss of joy and peace in our lives from the stresses that surround us, the loss and loneliness we experience when our loved ones do not share our faith. As we gather up the pain of the past, we offer it to you, O God, asking that into our open hands you will place the gift of peace. Please take a moment to remember the losses. I invite you to name them aloud, or in the silence of your hearts.
The third candle we light for those who experience a loss of direction in their lives. The God of the Exodus and the God of our darkest times, you led Moses and your people through the wilderness to a new land. Hear our prayer. We want so much to have a sense of direction, to know where we are and where we ought to be headed. But the darkness and the questions stay. You ask us to be full of faith, to believe deep within that you are our signpost, that you are our wisdom and our guide, and to trust in your presence. Your words to us are clear. Do not fear. I go before you.
The fourth candle we light as a sign of hope, the hope that the Christmas story offers to us. We remember that God, who shares our life, promises us a place and time of no more pain and suffering.
This set of readings is by theologian Reverend Howard Thurman. Because it was written several decades ago, I am choosing to modify the gendered language. A moment is the moment, Part 1. Again and again in the course of the history of nations and individuals, a single event becomes the critical point by which the life or death of vast issues is determined. It is impossible to know of what any event is prophetic and how many strands of destiny are caught in a single pattern that is woven before our very eyes. A chance word overheard by a passerby may alter the entire structure of their subsequent days. An impression made upon the mind of a growing child by some nameless person who crossed their path and disappeared may be the motif that shapes the fate of millions of people years after, when the child has become a leader of people, strategically placed at a fateful crossroads in the history of a people. It is impossible to know when a moment is the moment, when an act is the act, when an issue is the issue. In 165 BC, a Jewish leader, Judas Maccabeus, with or without a sense of destiny, spearheaded the funded hopes and dreams and dedicated passions of Israel and flung them triumphantly in the face of the legions of Antiochus Epiphanes in a decisive battle that unraveled a thread out of which the patterns of Christianity and Islam were woven. It is well within the mark to say that if Judas Maccabeus had been defeated, it is not unreasonable to assume that Judaism would have perished. And without Judaism, there would have been no Christianity and no Mohammedanism. The human family would have been easily involved indefinitely in pouring out its votive offerings before altars of idolatry, stark and meaningless, yielding no hope and no response. It is in celebration of this event, of what may be regarded as unconscious destiny, that the Feast of Lights is commemorated for 8 days in December in countless Jewish homes all over the world. A single event in history, a man who refuses to renounce his faith either by default or defeat, becomes, in the circling wisdom of a providence rich in variety and creativity, the gate through which have marched hundreds of generations of people to a life abundant and a hope undimmed.
Continuing Howard Thurman's writing, Part 2. There must always remain in every people's life some space for the celebration of those events of the past that bear their fruit in the present. Those events in which the race seems to catch its breath and to give the long look forward and backward. Such events are surrounded by a quality all their own, and yet they seem to gather into themselves the essence of all striving and the meaning of all hope. Hanukkah is such an event. Here was a moment in the life of Israel in which a people was faced with an ultimate choice. On the one hand, to renounce the very heart of a faith in one God with whom they were covenanted, and to give a false value to a profound communal commitment. On the other hand, to say yes to a truth by which the steps of the past had been guided when there was no light and no guide save one. One man in his vision became, first, a whole nation, and then the whole race of humankind, as he affirmed in his deed, "The Lord God is one, and alone is worthy to be worshipped and to be praised." In steady stream there has flowed from him a way that, for generations of people, has become the way. Christmas is such an event. Here was a moment in the life of Israel in which a baby was born, in surroundings as commonplace as the leaves and branches of the olive tree. In him was seen, by many, that for which their hearts had hungered and of which their dreams had foretold. He grew into manhood, exhibiting in word and deed a fresh, new quality of the age-old response of the human spirit to the call of God. God was everything to him. His was the vision of a great creative ideal that all people are children of God, that the normal relation of one being, one human being to another, is love. Anything else is against life. And that there is a personal power, God, equally available to rich and poor, to Jew and Gentile, to men and women, to the wise and the foolish, to the just and the unjust. For millions, his birth marks the turning point in human history, and Christmas is the event above all events. For it marks the moment when a new meaning is given to ancient words. The eyes of the blind are opened, the captives are set free, and the acceptable year of our Lord is become literal truth. Hanukkah and Christmas spring from the same womb and are mothered by the same brooding spirit. One marks freedom from tyranny and the preservation of the eternal light for all generations. The other announces that there is a presence in the common life, a light that lighteth every person that cometh into the world.
In our very generous congregation, traditionally, we give our plate each Christmas Eve service to the minister's discretionary fund, which is used to support UUCB members and friends during times of economic challenge. Now, during these pandemic times, folks have been incredibly generous to the minister's discretionary fund during the entire year. And while we have been able to help a number of UUCB members and friends, we have a good bit in the fund now. So instead, I would like to invite us this year to share our plate and share our generosity instead with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. This is a national UU organization that does work both in the United States and around the world. They have particularly been doing work throughout the COVID pandemic in grassroots support for responses and recovery to the pandemic, both nationally and internationally, and then do a variety of other projects with justice-related issues throughout the world. Right at the moment, one of their projects of note is helping to support democratic elections in Honduras. And they are funded in large part by our Unitarian Universalist congregations. So as we have our time of sharing and our offertory and our offering in this service, I invite you to open your heart during this time of generosity to help support our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. I absolutely love it when we get to hear the voices and the gifts of our children in our services. Thank you so much, Katie, for your work with them and for bringing their voices to us. So, what is the purpose and the meaning of life? Now, you thought I'd start with a small bite of a question since we're in this grand service, right? But with our focus on joy this month and during this holiday season, this seemed like a good question to ask, right? So here's the Dalai Lama's answer to this great, big, huge question. After much consideration, he says, I believe the purpose of life is to find happiness. It doesn't matter whether one is a Buddhist like me or a Christian or any other religion or no religion at all. From the moment of birth, every human being wants to discover happiness and avoid suffering. No differences in our culture or our education or our religion affect this. From the very core of our being, we simply desire joy and contentment. But so often, these feelings are fleeting and hard to find, like a butterfly that lands on us and then goes and flutters away. But the ultimate source of happiness is within us, he says, not money, not power, not status. Some of my friends, he says, are billionaires, but they are very unhappy people. Power and money fail to bring inner peace. Outward attainment will never bring real inner joy. We must look inside. Sadly, he goes on, many of the things that undermine our joy and happiness we create ourselves. Often it comes from negative tendencies of the mind, emotional reactivity, from our inability to appreciate and utilize the resources that exist within us. The suffering from a natural disaster we cannot control, but the suffering from our daily disasters we can. We create, in fact, most of our own suffering, so it should be logical we also have the ability to create more joy. It simply depends on the attitudes, the perspectives, and the reactions we bring to situations and to our relationships with other people. All right, so how y'all like that? The purpose of life? Yeah. The purpose of life is to be happy, to create and spread joy. Actually, to specifically quote what he says, the purpose of life is to find happiness. I remember a friend of mine who put it very similarly when he talked about what he had found to be the purpose of life, even more specifically as not finding joy, but he had found it to be chasing joy. That's what drove him and brought him the greatest sense of meaning and purpose, chasing joy. So what does it mean to find joy or to chase it, and how do we know when we have found it? And found not just a fleeting sense of happiness, but that deeper thing that we call joy. So there's a popular method for decluttering. I bet you didn't think I was going to go there. Popular method for decluttering running around that puts joy up front and center. Anyone know what it is? The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. And the method is called the KonMari method, which, by the way, is just a rearranging of her name. Marie Kondo, KonMari method. There, now you got it. Now stay with me, because it'll make sense why I'm bringing this up and talking about decluttering on Christmas Eve. The core of the KonMari method of decluttering and setting up one's home is to keep the things in your life that bring you joy. That's it. That's the core of it. Kondo instructs folks to literally hold each item and consider whether it sparks joy. To hold it close to your heart and ask yourself the question, does this spark joy? And she's specific. You can't just look into your overstuffed closet and ask if, hey, does everything in there give me a thrill? But rather to pick up each one and really consider its joy-bringing characteristics. And to clarify what it means to bring you joy rather than just a thrill, a momentary sense, fleeting happiness. Now, this sounds like a pretty good method, and I can attest it really works too. Although I admit I did not take to heart the part of the method where you have to literally say goodbye to each item you let go of. I didn't go quite that far, but the joy part I did. Surrounding yourself in your home with things that bring you joy brings a frequent smile when you come into that space. In fact, when I downsized into my tiny house, I got rid of a ton of things out of just space necessity, including most of my book collection. After all, a Kindle is much smaller than a shelf full of fiction books, right? But I've realized that I was missing something and have since begun, sometimes in earnest, to reaccumulate my favorite books. They bring me joy, and I realized my home was emptier because I was missing the joy they brought me, being there in my space. But we can take the KonMari method further than just our homes, and use the question about virtually everything in our lives. It gets hard, but let's do it. Let's KonMari our lives. Let's KonMari our calendars, our commitments, our priorities. Does it spark joy? Does this thing we're doing spark joy for us? Does this place we're going bring us joy? Does the energy that we're putting into a relationship return joy for us? If the answer is no for any of these questions, then why on earth are we keeping it going in our lives? Okay, except for bringing out the trash and things like that. Not having it there sparks joy, so actually that still belongs in your life. Don't make that excuse. Now, I admit asking this question, I've even ditched treasured holiday traditions when I realized they weren't so treasured and they weren't bringing me joy. I remember after begging off one of them, suddenly the rest of the family said, wait, she doesn't have to do it? Do we have to do it too? And everyone gave it up. Apparently it hadn't been bringing anyone any joy. Now, there are many theories on joy and happiness out there. We talked about some a couple of weeks ago. And we're talking about creating moments of joy and space for joy. So I just want to mention one other perspective. Maybe something in it will inspire you as we're heading into this new year and considering, in the midst of everything going on in the world, considering what joy might be possible. To sum up, a bunch of research and wisdom from great spiritual leaders, which isn't it cool when they come together? Absolutely love to be a fly on the wall, or at least get to read it afterwards. There are 8 pillars of joy, 8 things that help to cultivate joy in us human beings. 4 of these are qualities of the mind. They are perspective, humility, acceptance, and humor. The other 4 are qualities of the heart: forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, and generosity. Perspective, starting with the qualities of the mind, being able to see things in a different light, from different shoes, widening our perspective and our attention. Humility, which is far harder to do than to talk about. Accepting one another as we are and as we are growing to be. And of course, humor, being able to laugh, to enjoy things, to joke, and most of all, to be able to laugh at ourselves. And then the qualities of the heart which point both inwards and outwards. Forgiveness, which we talked about this past Sunday. Compassion, gratitude, and generosity. Attitudes of the heart. Our internal perspectives and our way of being in the world. And let me probably add in what Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us. I love this line. What he reminds us is, don't forget to smile. Let us fill our lives and our time with that which sparks joy for us. May we cultivate our set points for happiness and our capacities for joy, for seeing it, for finding it, for chasing it, and for finding what sparks it through all our days. And may the light of this holiday season fill you and spill over into the world, bringing joy to all it touches. All right. Speaking of light spilling out into the world, this is the first time I get to see this ritual here at UUCB. So now we are going to spread the light, to light these beautiful bays of candles. And some of y'all came earlier to the church today during our open house and lit some of the candles also, so that many of us were able to take part in this tradition. So what we'll be doing is, right now, for folks who are here while we're doing this service, some of our worship associates, members of our fabulous choir, who reminded me today I was literally preaching to the choir. Thanks, folks. We'll be coming up to light the candles. So I invite you into a time of calmness, of groundedness, both feeling the joy of seeing this ritual and seeing what joy is sparked for you. We'll have some music, we'll sing a couple more songs. So let us together spread the joyful light of this Christmas Eve. Our final reading is by Sophia Lyon-Fahs. For so the children come, and so they have been coming, always in the same way they come, born of the seeds of their parents and ancestors. No angels herald their beginnings, no prophets predict their future courses, no wise people see a star to show where to find the babe that will save humankind. Yet each night a child is born is a holy night. Many, sitting beside their children's beds, feel glory in the sight of a new life beginning ever anew. They ask, where and how will this new life end, or will it ever end? Each night a child is born is a holy night. Time for singing, a time for wondering, a time for worshiping, a time for joy. And now we extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not the ones in our hearts. These are the lights of our soul that shine forth when the world may seem too dark, the spark that ignites hope when that may seem lost. Your light is precious. Carry it with you always. Go now with hope, with peace, with joy, with love, and may you have a Merry Christmas and a happy holiday. Blessed be.